Welcome to the Simpleton Podcast, featuring special guest Maggie Glemkowski. How are you, Maggie?
I'm great. It's great to be here with you today, Clark.
Great. Before we tell people what organization you're with, how about you tell us, how did you find out about our podcast?
So we have some dear friends in the Kansas City area, Sam and Emily Sharp, and we all went to school together at Franciscan University. Great school. And Em and I were just sharing favorite resources, and she's like, you got to check out this podcast. So I'm really glad she did. So it's having been listening for a little bit, it's extra fun to be on today.
Well, that's great. So you're not in the Kansas City area. Where are you coming from?
I'm coming from Littleton, Colorado, so just south of Denver.
Did I hear that you're involved with the Eucharistic Congress at some level?
Yeah, so, well, I guess you could say historically now we were. But my husband, Tim, he was the founding CEO of the National Eucharistic Congress, Revival and Pilgrimage. So that was definitely a big, family endeavor for a few years. He's now with Amazing Parish here locally in Denver. But that was a huge part of our heart as a family for the few years. For anyone who was able to come last July to the Congress in Indianapolis, that was just a real gift to be there with you. So yeah, that was definitely a big chapter of our family's life. We're still kind of in recovery mode, if I'm being honest.
Did you have to relocate to Indy for a little bit or not?
We didn't. No, I mean, Tim's travel schedule for a few years was pretty wild. He was often traveling 12 to 15 nights a month. So he logged some good time in Indy, but we did not relocate, especially because the revival for the years leading up to the Congress was really a national movement. So his work took him all over the country. So thankfully, the kids and I, we stayed here, and we would joke he'd come visit us in Colorado.
And when when the church has done this before, there was the convocation in Florida years ago, and it was like when I first heard of it, even this Congress, I thought, I won't go this year, I'll go next year. Is there ever going to be a next year on this Congress, or is this like a once in a lifetime type thing?
No, I mean, this was the 10th, National Eucharistic Congress. There have been
okay.
9, but it had been, I think, I should know this. I want to say there continues to be international congresses. I think it'd been like 80 years since there had been one in the U.S., but the hope is actually that the plan is to resume now that movement of gathering, not yearly, but every so often. I think it's to be determined the next year that information is going to be released, but certainly there will be more to come.
Wow. So the last one was like a long time ago?
A long time ago, yeah.
So we fit in 9, like
way back in the day, like.
Yeah. And then
like around
we actually
before World War
US
II or
hosted
something?
an international one. So, semantics, but it wasn't a national one. It was an international one. And the keynote speakers for that were a little sister from Albania and a bishop from Krakow, Poland. So we're talking St. John Paul the Great and Mother Teresa were the keynote speakers.
And they was just a bishop, and she would have been like before she was famous, right?
Yeah. Isn't that neat?
Wow. But that's not why we're here today. We're here today because you and I have, it's not a formal affiliation at all, but we're both in contact with one big
informal affiliation.
We are informally part of how about you introduce it?
I mean, we're, I guess, informally affiliated with SOLT broadly. So that's kind of, I guess, in addition to our dear friends, the Sharps, how we've crossed paths as being a part of that, next tier of not official SOLT people.
Right. And so SOLT is the Society of Our Lady of the Trinity. You're more official than me because you're actually on the board of something.
Yes, I guess so. But now, do your kids go to the school?
Yeah. And my kids have been in school like 9 years. There's this 50-year-old SOLT Montessori school here in Kansas City that has lately been growing massively because they finally got a big enough building that they can grow into it. So it grew 40% last year. Yeah. And so that's going great. And it's a very beautiful education where God's just kind of in the water.
Mm.
And it's got Protestants and Catholics there, which has been nice too. So
that's neat.
But let me give my attempt at summarizing SOLT quickly. So SOLT is Society of Our Lady of the Trinity. There's a group of priests and brothers, there's a group of sisters, and then there's a lay group that you can become a member of. And this is founded pre-Vatican II. And the idea of it was that these three groups would collaborate, right? And you are part of one of the SOLT projects. Can tell us about what project you're part of?
Yeah. So I'm up on the board of the SOLT Family Mission Experience. And the community, the missional community, is unique, as you're pointing out, in that it's comprised of the priests, the religious, and laity. So there's a real natural kind of folding in of families into the community there, because they're already living that out. Ideally, when SOLT is lived in its fullest form, it's those three arms, so to speak, living together in they call them ecclesial family teams, so that they go and they serve areas of deepest apostolic need all together. And not every area that SOLT exists has all three of those branches present, but it's really cool when you see them all working together. So yeah, I'm on the board of the SOLT Family Mission Experience, and I was asked to join it last fall after, it's kind of a funny way how this all happened, because I'm not in SOLT, but I myself had a very impactful experience through college and my young adulthood of really encountering Jesus in a profound way in the context of mission, and had really wanted to bring our family into that setting to really let our kids encounter like the mission church in that way. And I had friends who had served with the SOLT community in Belize, so I knew that there was a really just a beautiful community there, and a real openness to like American volunteers. And so, well, my husband was very busy and distracted running the Congress. I kind of like planned a DIY mission trip for our family down to Belize, and I was like, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. We'll get down there. We'll figure it out." And it was one of those, we got on the plane, and he was like, "Wait, we're doing what?" We're like, "It'll be fine. They're great." So he was a real trooper about it, and the kids were too. But at that point, this organization didn't exist. But it's a real testament, honestly, to again, to the community of the religious order, how much we were just welcomed into the fold of like what they're doing down there in Belize, because they were like, "Yeah, we get families, we love families, we serve as a family, so come on down." About 6 months later, the priest that we gotten to know down there, Father Scott, in Belize City, he called me up and he's like, "You got to talk to Deacon Ken Dawson. He's been a member of SOLT laity for about 15 years, and he had felt really called actually to leave a successful career in tech to do this full time." And so he had just felt really compelled to find ways to make short-term missions and an opportunity for families to connect with the SOLT community on the mission sites actually doable. By and large, mission trips for families are not feasible. It's just that there's way too many barriers to entry for most people, whether it's cost or time. So Deacon Ken had really had this call to go and actually make it doable for families to come and be a part of their mission community.
Before we talk about, I don't know, all the different reasons why and what, but what actually is your group offering to people? Like if someone's like, "Oh yeah, love the idea, family mission," what's the offer that's here?
Kind of the elevator pitch here. So basically what the SOLT Family Mission Experience does is it provides a very affordable and adaptable short-term mission trips for families. So a family can come for 1 to 2 weeks to any of the already designated SOLT mission sites. Right now we are in Belize City, in Cologne, Mexico, about to be okayed to work at the SOLT presence in North Dakota. And then with plans to expand to the Philippines and hopefully other SOLT sites as well. So it's it really, I'm very convicted it is like the most doable mission trip option out there for families.
So a family's got to think, well, if I'm going to go to one of the foreign ones, I got to get passports for everyone. That's not cheap, right? And then they have to get the plane flight to and from, I assume, right? Mm-hmm. What else is there? Like, say they show up in Belize City, now what? Like price wise, like what's expected of them?
So right now our our ask is that we know that alone, passports and flights, can be prohibitively expensive. We just ask for a fee of $250 for the family for the trip. So that covers your accommodations, that covers us picking you up, bringing you back and forth everywhere you need to go, dinner every night. And then families who can give more will give more, but we don't ever want that to be a barrier or a reason not to come. And so we've just really pushed that cost down as low as we can. And depending on where you're flying from in the country, flights also aren't always as bad as you'd think. Like we can get fine flights here from Denver for like 300 round trip.
What if you have a weird number of kids? What if there's a family here who's got like 6 kids? So like if they arrive, there's going to be like 8 people in the family. They don't fit in all the minivans. They might need 2 different cars. What's the accommodation like?
We have a 16 passenger bus. So, I mean, I know some Catholic families definitely expand. They definitely have to be like a lot of them at that point.
Okay.
And then extra vehicles as well. And what's great is the airport's actually, I'm speaking specifically of Belize, but it's only 15 minutes away from the actual place where we stay and serve. So even if you had to do multiple airport runs, it's very doable. It's a small country.
And where are you sleeping? Are you sleeping like in the church basement with the kid? Is everybody on the floor? Like, is it camping or what is it?
So there is now actually, this is a great part of what's unique about this is there is a house that's designated for families coming on mission trips. I'm sorry, it's a building. It's 4 apartments in one building. And all of the apartments are 1 to 2 bedrooms. So typically we keep, one family to each apartment, unless they're smaller families or, close friends, then you can definitely do a couple families in each apartment. But they're everything you need. They have, simple beds, kitchenware, everything you'd need to bring a family in. It's, going into a cross-cultural experience just is inherently stressful, especially when you put kids in the mix, even if it's like travel for fun. So by keeping the accommodations kind of just very livable, that's one of the ways that we lower stressors for families. Is like, oh, I can just like get a good night's sleep and take a shower, and I have a refrigerator to put my things in. And again, it's all like walking distance from where we do most of the service and the parish. So it's very doable.
So does a family like kind of come into town? I'm sorry, these are such practical questions, but this is what I'm most interested in actually. But do you like arrive and then you're like, all right, we got to get to the grocery store. We got to stock this for, like, are you making all your own meals in this apartment, or how's that work?
So typically, because like we do invest in the relationships ahead of time. So if a family has applied, whether it's, we've had families apply individually or a group come with a parish, but we'll get to know the family ahead of time. So if you've got food allergies or kids, has preferences for XYZ, that the team that's actually there in Belize will do their best to actually have food ready to welcome you when you get there. And then dinner is provided every night. A local woman comes and cooks for everybody. Families they are responsible for their own breakfast and lunch, but there'll be food there to welcome them. We'll just get them over to the grocery store to get kind of like, what kind of cereal does your kid like? And they'll pick that up themselves. But it's also in Belize, so groceries are pretty darn cheap.
Now, what if like a family that was like the Grinch family applies and they just have bad attitudes? I mean, do you screen people out on this, or how do you do you need like a letter from your priest or what?
Good question. We wouldn't turn you down because you have a bad attitude ahead of time, but we might ask like, do you feel like this is like the best fit? Like, like we do like interact with everyone. So if it seems like, we haven't actually had that experience yet. Typically, if you're going to be the kind of person who's like, I'm excited to go on a mission trip, but like ask us, you're usually have the right attitude. If that happened and they did show up still, I guess you just got to hope the good Lord Jesus takes care of the rest, They wouldn't be turned away though.
But I feel like, so how long has this been going on? Because I feel like the fact that you haven't had some crazy missionary show up yet is a sign that you haven't been doing this for very long.
Good point. Yeah, a year and a half. There were 6 trips that went out last year, and I bet they'll hit about a dozen this next year is probably be where we'll land. So it is newer for sure. But again, it's kind of like so far, especially I think when you throw in like, this is like families. This isn't, I'm 20 and I happen to have a long break. I think it'd be cool to go serve. Like, if you're thinking about doing a mission trip with your kids, you've done a level of already like intentional discernment on the topic. It just kind of is like a unique way to choose to spend time as a family. So, and that's what we found so far, is that if you're willing to consider taking your time off, like maybe you would have instead gone on vacation or whatever else you were going to use that time for, and you've said, you know what, we feel really called to go serve as a family together, there's just going to be like a level of openness to God leading there that I think you might not to like say that you would get that in a group of young adults. I could just see like a college kid showing up with a bad attitude a little more easily.
Well, what about, so we do have we allow single people to listen to this podcast. Where do you send them? Does SOLT have another mission program for them?
Yeah, they're actually, SOLT has a specific missionary opportunity branch for young adults. So that's a whole, like it's another outreach from SOLT, but it's really geared to that young adult community. And the SOLT Family Mission Experience, just to get into semantics again a little bit, this is like flows out of the outreach of the laity. And I think the volunteer for like the short-term missions is under the priests. It's all like SOLT, but just to say they're slightly different. So like there's, I think Father Dave Brocky, at least last I heard, oversaw that specific genre. But if it was like, hey, my family's coming and I'm 20 years old, we're not going to be like, sorry, you can't join, everyone's welcome. There is just like a specific geared for, this is a group of 10 young adults. We kind of, we're for the families.
So if a family's interested, are they going to reach out to you directly, or how do they like kind of get in contact?
Yeah, for sure. So if they want to start with just getting information, there's a lot on our website. It's SOLT, so SOLTFME.org. And our contact info is in there. You can email Deacon Ken or myself. Our info is right on the website. And we're quick to respond. So if anyone's interested, whether it's like, hey, I'd love to come, or hey, I'd just like to get more information, we're super happy to answer questions. I brought my kids, so I can also weigh in as like a parent of young children, what it's like to have kids in these settings. But yeah, just reach out.
Okay, so now I kind of want to get into the weeds on families doing mission work. So I'm aware of two different ways I've seen families do mission work in the past. I want to know where you guys fall or if you're totally different. One way is what I think of as a fairly Protestant way, where they literally are going to these almost like little revivals, and everyone in the family is giving a witness, including the kids, in front of like an audience, right? And then the other almost opposite way I've seen families go on mission is they'll show up in Mexico to like build a house, repair a house, put a roof on or something like this, right? And the whole thing just doesn't at some level make sense, because it's like they're giving all this money to go volunteer to do something that I'm sure the locals could do cheaper and better than a bunch of people who've never put a roof on, a Mexican house before, right?
You might not put the roof on the right way, like yeah.
Right. I've actually heard the scheme is that the locals come and correct the work at night or after the people on mission leave, So what are you guys doing with these families that arrive?
Yeah, great question. So to kind of address those two different ways that you've seen it done before, it is different with the SOLT Family Mission Experience because of the fact that we're entering into the life of a long-standing mission community. So any of the outreach that happens with these families is all in line with what's already happening. So we're not going to come and like start a house and then abandon that project. You know what I mean? Because we ran out of time. It's the ongoing outreaches of that soul community that the families enter into. And they need extra help. There's, what does Father Scott say? There's more than enough people to love. So come on down and love up on them with us. But that's a real gift. And I learned that myself working with the Salesians. I spent a year after university volunteering with the Salesians in Zambia, and being able to really see the extent to which, well, we were certainly like welcomed, and the efforts and the love that we brought were so appreciated. That mission and the work that those sisters were doing was going to continue whether or not they had extra volunteers there. They're just so invested in those communities. So I do think that like the concept of no harm is really important to the SOLT Family Mission Experience. And what you're speaking to there is sometimes there can be an accidental harmful effect of short-term missions. Like, again, you come in and you either like make promises that you can't follow up on. You essentially act as like a handout, which can be problematic in and of itself, or you start projects that then aren't finished, so you put people in vulnerable situations that then you're not actually able to continue to meet those needs. And that's a very important concept for SOLT in general. And then certainly SOLT Family Mission Experience will only do what that mission community has deemed to be like appropriate and beneficial. And there's a lot of locals who weigh in as well. Like, we work closely with not just like the SOLT members in Belize, but like the Belizean locals themselves to help determine what's needed here. For example, in the Belize, like every group that comes down will do some level of manual labor at the Mary Magdalene Center, which is a collection of small homes that is for women and children in transitional housing situations. Like, they have some reason that they are out of a home right now, and we're helping get them back on their feet. And there just is like a lot of need for like hands-on work there. And it's simple stuff. Like a group that just went down last month, they just spent a couple days like literally like shoveling stones into the swamp that these homes are on because it had gotten hit by a hurricane. And so like they can't, reach some of the homes that are further back because everything got washed out. And that's free labor. They didn't have to hire someone to come do that, but somebody has to actually just like shovel stones. And so sometimes it's simple acts like that. But the primary focus is actually on heavy like relational ministry, spending time with people, praying with people, going and visiting the sick, the shut-ins, a real ministry of presence, of encounter. But it is a combination of those two, both a ministry of like presence as well as manual labor for like just the things that somebody needs to do and no one's had time or money to make it happen.
How do you do the ministry of presence if there's like a language barrier?
Well, actually, most people in Belize speak English.
So, but you're also going to Mexico and other places, or the four unit building you talked about, was that in Belize?
Yes.
Okay, good. So is that probably...
That's a good question. Like, it's definitely it can be a lot harder in areas with a language barrier like Mexico, et cetera. What I don't know. I think like one of the things I was reflecting on recently was when I used to work in the ICU, I'd get patients that had like really just like pretty tragic situations, and oftentimes they're sedated, just a really kind of dire situation, and kind of not something that I could like fix, or like the hospital and our whole team could fix. And initially, it was really hard not to actually be able to go in and like make the situation better. And over time, I just really learned that just by being there with that person, even when they couldn't talk to me and maybe they could hear me, I always assumed that a patient, even if they're unresponsive, can hear me. But there'd often be language barriers in those situations too. Over time, I just really came to learn that by just like being there and being attentive and prayerful to that person in front of me, like there still is like a dignity and a love that you're bringing. And that is more impactful than I think sometimes we give it credit for. So for someone who is, alone, and even if they don't speak the same language as you, you come with your kids and you spend time with them, and likely whoever's there with you from the SOLT community can speak the language and do translation for you. It is actually like still very like loving to just be present to that other person.
I kind of have two questions. One is like, are there SOLT people there who it's kind of like a 40-hour a week job, and that's who you're with during the day, kind of helping out? And also my question would be like, what if you're a family that's either got a 2-year-old or a baby in arms or both, and you're not, like at my house, we wouldn't be productive, or we wouldn't be terribly productive cleaning our own yard, let alone going and helping someone else with manual labor, because like there's some people who need held,
Right.
And are there alligators in Belize?
Yes to the last, but they stay in the canals is what I've been told so far. Alligators just make me nervous in general. I'm not a big I don't know if they're crocodiles because it's like fresh and salt water is there, but there's
particularly with like 2-year-olds, that seems touchy.
Yeah. Well, they are like the way that to side note, the way that the homes are built is actually like up off the water, those that are near the canals, enough that apparently they can't get up, is what I've been told. So nobody seemed to have any alligator injuries. I think you'd be worse off in Florida on a golf course. But okay, so your first question was if there's anyone who works full time there. No, like the people who are there full time are missionaries. They're either sisters or priests or brothers or laity who live there on mission. And they are there in addition to, like, Deacon Ken will come down to help lead missions. But we work heavily with that community, and they are just missionaries. The second, as far as like family demographics, I mean, when we went, our youngest at the time was 2, and there are, like, there are parts of it that is harder because you've got kids who still need to nap, or you're like, yeah, don't go looking for alligators. But there is no actual like age limit. I feel like 6 and up is a good range for kids who are actually like old enough to engage more and even understand and be a little more steady on their feet. But babies have come. It's really not an actual like reason that we turn anyone away. I think that's more for a family to discern too. If you've got an 8-year-old who has never traveled before, who really prefers their routine, they might not be a kid who necessarily loves being in a brand new setting with a lot of unfamiliar aspects to each day. Again, we wouldn't say no, but we would just say, like, consider that as far as like, would this be like a really stressful first time traveling?
So it sounds like you're going to have an interview with families to kind of see what would work best for them and how suitable they are for the trip.
Yeah. Again, like I so far we haven't had anyone that we said we don't think we're a good match for you, or like I'm sorry, we haven't had anyone in which we said you're not a good match for this. But people who have reached out who have said, like, yeah, you know what, our kids are 0 and 2 right now. And so I love this idea. I just think at this point, like, 6 hours of our day is someone's napping. So we'll circle back in a few years. So I think there's like a self-select out aspect once you kind of like get a sense for it. But we do hear from families who do have those like kind of, younger kids who just are excited and hoping that could we come? It's like, of course you could. That's just kind of your discernment too, as far as like, do you want to come down? If you have to, someone has to be at the house the whole time.
So before I ask a deep spiritual question, let me ask a very shallow question.
Okay.
There's got to be some people listening who are like, wow, that would be so cool. I'd love to go and serve for a week. And then I'd want to rent a car, take my family to a hotel on the beach and,
For sure.
see a tropical beach. You know what I mean? But that also, that's not the spirit of the trip, to go on a nice beach vacation in Belize, right? But like, how do you guys handle that situation?
Well, we have had people go to the islands after, the Keys, they call them, and they're incredible out there. But that's kind of like, we've done the mission trip here. We're here for you for these 7 days. And then if you're going to stay another week, that is kind of like your decision. But like the spirit of the trip is to be there and serve together. We're not going to tell anyone not to do that, certainly, but yeah, by and large, like, the spirit of the trip would be to go together, to leave together with that missional sending. I think it's like a little hard to end on that note because of like the nature in which you were entering into a very like encounter heavy experience of like the poor. But again, it's also like, I'm not gonna discourage someone if that's really like something they've set their hearts on, is it is like this.
It's such a big deal to make the whole family travel internationally. It would be hard not to do a little bit of touristy stuff while you're there.
I also get that. It's like, you know what, like, yeah, the second largest barrier reef in the world is right there. I'm not going to stop you if you're going to go, And what's neat too is like the locals really, they love that their country is beautiful. And so they'll say, like, are you going to go to the islands? Are you going to go, like, they actually, like, they're very supportive of that in part as well. Like, on the flip side, I'd say the primary industry of the country is tourism. So I'm also not going to say don't do it, because like that's also like the primary industry. So
yeah, you're supporting the country that way too. Yeah. So what is the fruit of this and the spiritual fruit of this? Maybe different than normal missionary fruit that what change are you hoping for what are you, when it's on your heart to help families do mission work, why not just have families volunteer more at their local parish, say? And it's not an either or, but I'm just saying, like, why this?
Yeah, I think there's to step out of your comfort zone and to be willing to be so immersed instead of go for a couple hours and come back. There is just an openness in the heart that happens when someone is like exposing themselves to a new way of thinking and loving and serving for days in a row. It's one of the reasons that we don't say come for 2 days, like come for a week, come for 2 weeks, like let your hearts really like be changed by this experience. It's almost like in the same way that you could say like, well, why would you go on a pilgrimage when you've got Jesus in the tabernacle 5 minutes away from your house? It's part of it is like there is a spiritual act of saying like, I'm going to like step out in faith in this journey to encounter God in this new way. And I think some of it's as simple as just like calling. If God's put it on your heart to go serve in this particular way, it's people just responding to that. And sometimes he says, come and serve in your local parish. And that is what I'm actually calling you to do. But the hope would actually be that by a family choosing to make the sacrifices, it's not an easy thing to carve out a week as a family and to choose to spend it in this way. Our hope is that they would really immerse themselves in that culture of encounter to really, like distractions are gone. You're not in the States, so you're not going to be, your phones are gone. Your first world problems are gone. You're really focused on a big aspect of SOLT is learning to live Eucharist to Eucharist, to soak up the Word of God, to draw your strength from the sacraments, and then go out and serve together. It's almost like a boot camp for football or something. Like you go and you just like do like you're doing like missionary training of a sorts. But in many ways, we say like the sending actually happens when you go back home, because these aren't families who are discerning long-term mission. And maybe that vocation might come. I do think that I think there are a lot of people who might have a call, kids even who might have a call to serve for a year or two even in that context, who maybe never have a chance to realize it just because they were never exposed to that part of our beautiful church. But our hope would be that the fruit is that families come away just with a greater presence towards one another, to really have a greater sense of drawing their strength from Jesus in the Eucharist, and then just that mindset of like God has called us not just individually but as a family to live missionally, right? Like if we are like the domestic church, and we say it's not so much that the church has a mission as the church is a mission. If families are the domestic church, or like the little churches, as I think it was St. Augustine who referred to us that way, like there should be an aspect of our life that is inherently missional. And in JP2's encyclical on it, Redemptoris Missio, he breaks down mission into 3 categories. He says there's the pastoral care of the faithful, the new evangelization, and then mission ad gentes, like to the nations. And that it's actually the third is the only one that is like necessary for the church. The other 2 follow as a natural effect of the Christianization of areas, but it is like that to the nations that is what like inspires and invigorates are, I think, the words he uses to all the other missional aspects of our church. So to enter into like that form of mission, which isn't always as like accessible when we're raising kids, right? Most of our mission work will be pastoral care of the family, like the pastoral care of the faithful that exists within our own families. And then the new evangelization. Most of us live in, work in settings in which like we are bringing, reminding people of Christianity. But there is something that is really invigorating and inspiring about connecting with that essential mission of the church. So our hope is that families come immerse themselves deeply in the missional communities of SOLT and go back home just more on fire to live missionally together.
My experience of SOLT is that one of their main things they do is liturgy prep, which is like reading all the readings from this Sunday's liturgy and reflecting on them in small groups. Is that something that either you did or is a normal part of this mission?
It's every night. Yep. So there's mass, morning or evening. I think most SOLT sites have it twice, but Mass at some point every day. But every night of the mission trip ends with liturgy prep. So you prepare your hearts for tomorrow's Mass with reviewing over the liturgy, or with reviewing the readings for tomorrow's Mass, and then sharing where do we see God speaking to us in these readings, and then an opportunity to share, like, where did we see him today in the outreach and the service that we participated in. And so it's a really neat way to actually, like, within the mission trips, like, model to families that way of taking in the Word of God, to start seeing, like, the connections between Scripture and what God is showing to us and the people that you encounter each day. And then to make a heavy focus on the Eucharist is a big part of SOLT's charism. And then that's very much, SOLT spirituality is very thematic in these mission trips. They do like a very Marian Trinitarian formation is a part of every night. So it's a really neat, like, exposure to the beautiful, just the spiritual aspect of the order of the community.
I don't know that I have any more questions. What else do you have?
Those are a lot of the questions that we get right away are, what do we do? What does this look like? I think you had some good, like, practical ones in there too. But then, that's, if anyone is interested, like, we'd love to have you reach out to us. Just shoot us an email. Like I said, happy to answer questions. No, you're not crazy if you're thinking about it. It feels a little crazy at first. Like, could we do this with your kids? Like, yeah, there's families down in these sites that are living there full time, just, like, raising their families.
Are they SOLT laity?
One of the ones I know, one of them is now in formation, but not always. Sometimes they just live there and just feel called as a family.
Tell us the website again.
Or how to find
Sure. It's soltfme.org. So SOLTFME.org.
Great. And I want to throw this out there. Simple House has a feedback line. The Simpleton Podcast has a feedback line, 913-390-3672. All right. Well, God bless. Thank you so much, Maggie.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it, Clark.
All right. Peace be with you.